standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus, coming to you on the 24th of July, the year of our Lord 2024, episode 671. We're going to talk about some books that I finished, give a few brief comments on said books, perhaps give you a little bit of additional insight into how some of this stuff fits together. Also going to talk about, my my new ad that I'm running and why. And there's just a couple other things going on. And it was extremely tempting to kind of upend the entirety of this episode because of the events of last night. But I would say it's probably best to let it sit for another day before I comment on that. So if you know what I'm talking about, you'll probably want to join me on tomorrow's episode. Yeah, I guess we'll do another bonus episode this week. I'm not sure why it's absolutely necessary, but sometimes you just got to get this stuff off your chest. So before we get to the meat of the program, let me remind you the best thing you can do for me, for you, for making a difference, getting the voice out there is like, share, and subscribe to this program. Follow me on your social media of choice. As I say, I have a group and a page over at Facebook. I am a pro at Gab. I still drop in at MeWe. And to the best of my knowledge, you can still find my audio program posted over at YouTube. With that, here we go. Okay, so as you may have heard, I was on vacation last week. So on vacation, I promised myself that I would finish a number of books that I had started, commented briefly on, and never quite finished. So, in order, I finished The Small Farm Republic. I finished the book Federalism. I went through and finished reading the 5-Star Plan for 2024. We'll have more on that later. Also reread the book Christian Nationalism, the small version by Torba and Issachar. And I finished the Blue Dawn series. So pretty ambitious cycle there. Plus, tried to keep on pace with my morning Bible reading, and I finished the book Point Man by Steve Farrar. So again, ambitions. It was good to break away, take some time off, and quite frankly, not be involved in the melee of the moment and the politics of the time. So let me go back and start from the beginning, as they say. So before I do that, give me just a moment. Apparently it helps, ladies and gentlemen, if you actually set out the things you're going to talk about ahead of time rather than during the middle of the broadcast. So here we go. Okay, Small Farm Republic. You may recall I brought this up in the past. Heck, at this point it might have been back in February. Not really sure. So the book is put out by Chelsea Green Publishing. I will say that I wouldn't call them politically agnostic, but they're not uber left, and they spend the vast majority of their books are about agriculture and agricultural issues, including, homesteading and, alternative things. I've found quite a few good books there. I would recommend you take the time to look through the catalog over at Chelsea Green. So this book, The Small Farm Republic, is written by John Clare. The forewords by Joel Salatin. Now, I'm going to assume if you're listening to my show, you've probably at least somewhere in the past heard of Joel Salatin. He speaks for himself, but he wrote the foreword and the subtitle, if you will, Why Conservatives Must Embrace Local Agriculture, Reject Climate Alarmism, and Lead an Environmental Revival. Okay, so right now there's probably a good deal of my listeners that have tuned out and don't want to listen. But let me tell you why that would be a mistake. See, conservatives, the Republican Party, we are basically known for all the things that we oppose. We're known for being anti this or anti that. Now, I will be the first to tell you the Green New Deal is neither green nor a New Deal. I'll be the first to tell you there are a lot of nonsensical things that the federal government would like us to do under the idea of preserving carbon. And I have serious doubts on whether any of that's necessary or long-term beneficial, particularly realizing that I'm a carbon-based life form. But that being said, there are a whole lot of things that can be and should be dealt with. So among them, and I would say there's other things dealt with, but for me, the primary takeaway is we need to understand that there are legitimate problems, that we'll call them giant corporations, international corporations, if it makes you feel better, really only care about their bottom line. And quite frankly, that's because their shareholders want them to care about the bottom line. And those that aren't worried about the bottom line are typically taken over by leftists that are more concerned about their progressive outcomes rather than what's good and best for people in general. Just my opinion. And I guess I should add this just as a reminder. The show is called According to Callus, which means that everything in the show is according to Callus, which means that you have to accept that this is my opinion, my idea, my understanding, or my thoughts on a specific topic or a series of topics. So I'm not going to tell you with absolute certainty that I'm always right. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong if you don't consider my points. What I am going to tell you is I'm here giving you what is mostly well thought out reasonings for things and giving you an idea or a thought that perhaps you ought to consider. And I will wholeheartedly agree you ought to look into it yourself and do your own research before drawing your own conclusion. Because it's not about getting you to agree with me, it's getting you to open up your mind into looking into something else. So some of the chapter titles, if you will, are The Conservative Environmental Strategy, Reclaiming a Republican Legacy, A Regenerative Farm Policy, Escaping the Carbon Cult, The Soil of a Nation, The Looming Water Crisis, The Matter of National and Local Security, A Regenerative Economics, Culture and Agriculture, A Cry for Food Freedom. Wow, almost butchered that one. The Illusion of Renewables, Regenerating Human Health, America's Youth Are Our Small Farm Future, and Policies That Let Small Farms Breathe. The conclusion of the book is on 184, and it talks about a new beginning. In other words, some things that we could actually do now. So if I recall correctly, I had an excerpt I wanted to read out of here, so give me just 1 second to get there. So I'm going to read the first chapter of the conclusion, which is a beginning. And I think it would be fair to say this is paramount to the entirety of the book is the conclusion. In fact, I'm going to skip the first chapter. No, I'm going to do it. Never mind. I'll do the first paragraph of the first page of the conclusion, which is in fact the last chapter. Restoring the environment requires a seismic reorientation towards local and regenerative agriculture, period. Informed Americans must first and foremost advance a politicalization of the issue of agriculture, to be touted by conservatives and liberals together as an environmental platform, period. The left claims CO2 is paramount. All evidence points to industrial agriculture as the chief culprit of both toxic chemical contaminants and greenhouse gas emissions. Republicans can embrace, Republicans can embrace regenerative agriculture for its many other benefits offered that are consistent with conservative values. Period. For a change, everybody should be able to agree. The very first line after this is quite humorous to me. The Republican Party's current official environmental policy is insipid. Look, there's a lot to be said for this. And I will say, as a member of the platform committee for the Republican state of Texas part, or the Republican Party of the state of Texas, or the Texas Republican Party, depending on how you want to say it. I think we could have done better on our platform. I really think we could be more aggressive on this. I think that if we strive for the localism and strive for regenerative policies, which are conservative by nature, we can take and hold this issue going forward. It's going to take some courage. It's going to take some faith on some people, and it's something to lead with. My biggest fault to the party is we don't lead, and we don't lead well. We're really good about what we oppose, but we don't talk about the things that we want to do in a positive way. All right, so that's it for book one. And we'll visit these all together because they're all somewhat interrelated. Now, Federalism, How Decentralization Can Save America. Now, this book, I've mentioned it before. I might have even done a couple episodes directly related to some of the subjects in here. It was by Suzanne C. Sherman. She is an attorney who quit her practice to raise her children. In 2013, she left California to enjoy the peace and freedoms available in the remote location of the mountains of northeastern Utah. She makes some radio appearances, hosts 2 shows, and speaks about self-reliance, preparedness, federalism, history, and liberty. Her website is www.suzannecsherman.com. In any case, so these are a compilation of articles that she had written. It's a very easy read. It's about 150 pages long, talking about specific issues that would be better dealt with at the local level, right? We have federalism for a reason. States ought to and have the ability to deal with issues at a state level, and they can do a better job than one size fits all from the top-down strategy of the feds. So again, I wouldn't call it uber compelling, but it's very well written quickly. It's a quick read. Got some really good details in here about things that I didn't necessarily know. I got to be honest, most of the stuff I knew, but from prior of reading this, and I'm familiar with a lot of this topic, courtesy of Chris Ann Hall. That is not a negative. It's just somebody else has come to similar conclusions and did a good job of explaining it. So perhaps this is your flavor. This is something you might like better if you don't necessarily care for Brian McClanahan or Chris Ann Hall. But along the same lines, definitely worth the money that it cost. It was relatively inexpensive. I don't know, $10, $15. It was something I read in, I don't know, a day, just sitting, chilling out in a chair. Worth your time. It's educational. It's useful. Take the time out. I highly recommend it. Now, if you're a huge Chris Ann Hall fan and you've already read all of her books, some of this is going to be duplicative, just to be fair. But it's always good to get a second opinion or another thought. So we'll not dismiss that. Okay, next up on the list is the 5-star plan. So I'm going to just give you the highlights, but I'm going to spend a little more time on this, maybe even on the next episode. In fairness, yeah, I'm just going to give you the highlights, and we're going to go back and hit this on the next episode because I think it's worth your time. And after all, I'm doing a bonus episode, and I don't think I have enough material to make it 30 minutes in the bonus episode. So I'm going to add in 5-star plan 2024. Okay. For those of you that aren't aware, a gentleman by the name of Robert West, who lives out in East Texas. I know him personally. I wouldn't say we're, best friends or anything, but we've had a meal together. We have a good relationship. We talk from time to time. Solid dude. Ran for Congress and came up with a plan about replacing politicians with patriots, and very helpful in helping us come up with some changes and some improvements here in Collin County. Also was helpful from my understanding in Wise County, Grayson County, Smith County. So long story short, this is basically a blueprint of how you can make change or improvements in your county right here, right now. How does it work? Well, I'm going to give you some highlights here as soon as I get to them. Okay. So, again, I think the book is about 135 pages long. If you, well, let's just go with 130. About 130 pages long. Now, again, this is an outline of how you get things done. It's a how-to book. And to be fair, most of this has already been done in multiple counties, and I know it works. In fact, I'm one of the people that speak about the original version that is quoted at the end of the book. I have the honor of being listed after Bob Hall. I mean, one of the best senators we have in the state of Texas, so I took that as a big hoo-yah. Okay, so it talks about, I'm going to just give you the chapter contents, and we're going to spend a little more time on this tomorrow. Okay. The middle, parties do not believe, real people representing us, illegal immigration, voter fraud, inflation, they don't listen, schools, executive overreach, state and federal, bureaucracy. Then he talks about Texit, crime, fake news, and then he kind of does a little bit of wrap-off and talks about himself for a couple pages. And then he's got a list of all the reviews of, what's funny is I probably know a third of the people listed in here, and it's pretty great. And so I'll tell you this. I don't remember if this is $20 or $15. It doesn't matter. Go buy the book. Even if you have to settle for a Kindle version, go get it. Read through it. Understand the plan that's in place here and start working on it. It's proven and it works. Take the time. Now look, he'll be the first guy to tell you we're not going to agree on everything. There are several issues that we're going to disagree on, and we're just going to have to agree to disagree because there's much bigger things that we're working on. There's more important things that need to be dealt with, right? He'd be the first to tell you that. Now, I myself, I'm pro-Texit. I'm pro-vote. He's anti-Texit, but he's still pro-vote. I think that that's fair, right? If you are going to bring something up to a vote, then you have to discuss it. You have to know the material. You have to know what's going on. And that's kind of his argument. You need to know these things. You need to be aware of them. So in that case, look, I cannot encourage you anymore as we go into this general election cycle. You should read this. You should bone up on what's going on. If you're not a precinct chair and you're looking to become a precinct chair, this is what you need to know. This is the basic outline of the things that you need to know before you become a precinct chair. If you're a new precinct chair and you don't really know what's going on and you're thinking you're getting fed a line, go buy this book, The 5-Star Plan 2024 by Robert West, right? Go buy it. It's darn near a step-by-step explanation of how you make changes or how you make improvements. Now, I will tell you, this is a dual-edged sword, right? Because frankly, there are people that are not necessarily going to be looking to do good things. And once they have these same tools, they're going to do what they want to do. But here's what I'll tell you about that. Everybody that is a participant in politics deserves to be heard, deserves to be treated fairly, and deserves to have an up and down vote, or at least consideration of it. So while I am well aware that there are people that would oppose me personally or would oppose certain things that I want to do, I'm okay with that. I would tell them still, go buy this book, learn what's in here, and understand at the end of the day, if we're good conservatives, if we're good Republicans, if we're good conservatarians, whatever you want to label yourself, if we're good Christians, we ought to be able to work together for the greater good and put aside minor differences. My major takeaway, and like I said, I'm going to spend some more time talking about this in the bonus episode that'll be coming out on Thursday. Okay. Gone through 4 books. It's 20 minutes in. Okay. Slow down. Okay. The next book, the subtitle is A Biblical Guide to Taking Dominion in Discipling Nations. This is the Evil Christian Nationalism book, right? Andrew Torba, Andrew Issachar. Now, I want to say this. If you are anti-Christian nationalist, okay, fine. If you are not sure what it is, this is a pretty good definitive explanation in less than 100 pages, in less than 75 pages, giving you an outline of what these two leaders within the sphere of Christian nationalism would define it as, what their goals are. What is it that is at play here? What is their concerns? What are they addressing? It's all in here. It's not that hard. It's very easy read. It's pretty well thought out. And I will tell you, this is like a Cliff Notes version of understanding where somebody's coming from. This is not a full ideological breakdown of every little nuance and everything. No, this is just a basic overview that is extremely helpful into understanding something. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't necessarily like the title Christian nationalism or Christian nationalist. In fact, for a long time, I would dismiss that characterization because the people that were using the characterization had their own version of what it meant. And quite frankly, it was used as a pejorative without actually understanding what was going on. I always said, well, I see myself more as a Christian Texian, which is kind of a, fun way to twist it back on them. But the giant takeaway from this book is there is a component of people that are culturally part of the country they live in, and part of that culture is Christianity, and they ought to assert it and do it in such a way that doesn't punish those that don't follow the culture, but also asserts that this is the dominant culture and this is what the majority of us believe and want to see done. And they should be able to speak freely and do that. So basically, this is a rebuttal of the idea that you should be ashamed of privilege. I mean, that's another way to look at this, right? I mean, we've been shamed, and when I say we, I mean white, Christian, male, heterosexual. We've been shamed. We've been told we're evil, we're terrible, because, well, our parents made us white, our genetics made us male, our creator made us heterosexual, and male for that matter, and we chose to be Christian. Yeah, 3 of those 4 I really don't have any control over. Yeah, that makes about as much sense as me hating somebody that has ovaries or used to have ovaries, or somebody that's got a darker skin tone than I do. It makes no sense at all. It's pointless. But nevertheless, okay. So we're going to go through some of the chapter titles, and some of them are provocative, so enjoy. Chapter 1, Dominion. If you are a Christian, you're a Christian nationalist. Weapons for spiritual war in a post-truth world. You know what? I'm going to do the title and the subtitle. I think it'll be even more fun. Dominion, and then what's at stake? If you are a Christian, you're a Christian nationalist. This world belongs to Jesus Christ. Weapons for spiritual war in a post-truth world. The word, our most powerful weapon. This is not a Judeo-Christian movement, a preface for lazy journalists. Know them by their fruits. Are you tired of being a footstool? The Christian crusade to save free speech. Again. Embrace Jesus as king or be conquered. The time for lukewarm Christianity is over. Be the example. An eschatology of victory. The origins of the eschatology of defeat. Return to the eschatology of victory. And Christian nationalism's eschatology of victory. Chapter 9. If your pastor did not celebrate Roe being overturned, it's time to find a new church. Is your priest or pastor more afraid of man than God? Chapter 10. Total victory is inevitable. Prepare for the multi-generational fight. The Christian nationalist founding of America. So I should point out, at the end of the book, there's about 10 pages going through the individual states at the time of the founding and what exactly their Christian faith status was within that deal. So, look, these are two guys. They're avowed Christian nationalists making their case, explaining what they are, who they are, what they believe. And I would much rather take their word for it than some other people that are giving you their version of what they've read or their version of what they think it is. These are two guys that are unafraid to run out there and say, no, this is what we are, this is what we believe, and this is why we believe it, and this is what we think we ought to be doing with it. I mean, I got to give credit where credit's due. I think that's pretty solid. Now, you may still oppose it. You may still think it's a bad idea. But don't you think you ought to be fully informed about what you're opposing and what you think is a bad idea? Again, less than 75 pages. I think most people can read it in about 2 hours or less. Again, it's cheap. It's worth your time. I'm going to be reading Stephen Wolf's version of this, which is much longer, probably in the next couple of weeks, assuming I can find the time. All right, let's move on to the Blue Dawn series. There were 5 books. I finished the 5th book. And I got to say, I did a review. I don't know if I finished doing the reviews on the other 4 books. So this is Blaine L. Pardue. You can find this at Amazon. I buy the Kindle version, but there are paperback versions. I'm sure there's a hard copy version as well. Book 5 in the Blue Dawn series is Patrons of Terror. Now, so let me take a moment just to recap what's going on here in this series. A president died during an election cycle. The current president, who apparently lost the election, or at least it's not clear, called for a new election. During the process of calling for a new election, there was a coup. And the military sat on its hands and did nothing. And the Secret Service was compromised. The FBI, compromised. Every other 3-letter agency, including the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which is actually 5, Bureau, right? They were undermined. They were compromised. The conspirators, if you will, were successful. They took over the national government, and they started to basically push us into a progressive society. Now, of course, there were 20 plus states that were perfectly okay with this and were on board and wanted to do that. And willingly, I guess it'd be fair to say a plurality of the existing Congress was on board with this. So they pulled this off. They pulled it off well, and it was near complete. Now, in the context of the story, if I remember correctly, it's taking you back to where the events started 4 years earlier. And now we're dealing with a series of events that put us into the fact that they had a new election, because it's been 4 years. And there's a contested election. That is, the former vice president was elected president. And he won the Electoral College, if I remember this correctly. However, the progressives had a majority of the popular vote, and they're claiming they won. And then there were several states that were contested and what the outcome was. So essentially, it became a war between the states, a civil war for control of the federal government. And to make things simple, you had the patriots and the progressives. And they're fighting all these things. Now, in the course of the book, or a series actually, we've had a young man that was initially part of the progressive movement because he was taking advantage of some of the things they were doing that were at least nominally positive. And then through a series of events, he defends himself and his workers. Then he ends up being a target, if you will. And then they chase him away, and then he goes and liberates a camp. And then he's arrested and put in a supermax. And then he's liberated from the supermax. And then he goes and liberates another camp. Now, this is all going on in the background, in the backdrop of a brewing and engulfing civil war. And then we've got the idea that you've got dueling generals and dueling factions of the army vying for control of certain states. And there's a very interesting, I would say is accurate to my knowledge, explanation of how a guerrilla warfare situation may play out in New Hampshire. Then we're dealing with a siege going on in Atlanta, and a similar siege that ends up in St. Louis, and an offensive that comes out of New Mexico into Texas, and all these various things, and they're going on like chess pieces on the board, and it's all playing out. And when the series ends, you've got a satisfactory conclusion, but it leaves the door wide open for more, like a successor series, if you will, of what happens after all this. But what's most interesting is, at least for me, it's an entirely plausible series. In fact, being that the series was started about the same time that the current resident was allegedly elected, and all this has played out, it's been eerie in some of the predictions of certain things, and it's been really weird. And again, everything that's happening there, even though you don't want to believe it happened or it could happen, it's entirely plausible. To me, that was the most interesting thing about it. Everything that I read, and I'm thinking, oh, this is terrible, but was entirely plausible. I mean, if you just look after the last few weeks of what's gone on, you know, they nearly take out one person running for president. They do successfully take out another person running for president. Then the current vice president is now being elevated as the next greatest thing. And honestly, it's kind of a sketch situation there. But here we are, and I don't really feel secure that anything above board is going on right now. And irony of irony, the socialist progressives, aka Black Lives Matter group, is upset that a woman of color has been anointed as the presidential candidate for the Democrat Party without any primary votes. It seems to me they ought to be just fine with that. But again, we've got an entire book series that plays out how that might come about. The good news is we're not there. The good news is no matter how screwy real life is, it hasn't quite reached the point of where it is in this book series. Now, I got to tell you, I have some real concerns. I want to be a good cheerleader, so I'm going to bite my tongue by and large, because the other option's completely unacceptable. But I got to tell you, I'm disappointed with the National Party and what they did with the platform. I'm disappointed with the National Party with what they did with the statement, if you will. I'm disappointed with the fact that the National Party is basically caved into a whole lot of things that most of us have been holding the line on and pushing against for decades at this point. Now, I understand the rationale behind some of it. I get the triangulation aspect of it. I really do. And I suppose if it's pure strategy, it's a brilliant idea. But you're selling out the people that brought you to the dance. It just seems to me that, you know, there are plenty of things we can compromise on, but you don't give away the core principles. And it seems to me that's what the RNC did. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm reading too much into it. I hope that the information I've received is just people that are really upset and they haven't kind of sorted out all the details. I don't really know. And honestly, to paraphrase one of my favorite Clint Eastwood quotes, a man's got to know his limitations, right? So I have a little bit of influence in Collin County. I do. I mean, I'm not an elected official. Well, I guess I am, but I'm not. You know, I am now a vice chair of the Collin County Republican Party. I am a precinct chair. So technically, as a precinct chair, you are an elected official. I have somewhat of a pulpit, or a bully pulpit if you want to be more accurate, both with that job or that elected role and also with the podcast that I do. So I do have some minor influence in Collin County, Texas. A step beyond that, in the state of Texas, I would say that influence, small though it may be, is much, much smaller at the state level. But guess what? I have a number of friends and acquaintances that are also somewhat more influential than I am at the state level. And we talk, we discuss, and quite frankly, we agree on a whole lot of stuff. And because of that, my influence with them steps it up a notch. Not me, them, but our conversations, our reinforcing thought pattern does bring some of that influence at the state level. But even then, whatever influence we as a group might have in Austin is probably equivalently the same size as me alone in Collin County, or even in the city I live in, Collin County. But when you step up to the national level, we're nothing. We're a wisp in the air. And knowing that and understanding that, it makes it real easy to say, you know what? I care what the RNC does because they're the national form of my party. And I care that the RNC puts forth a good candidate. But I really don't care what they do because I have zero influence or input at the national level. Even the entirety of the state of Texas showed up to put forth their idea, and because of the way they ran that convention, zero input, zero influence, nothing. That's just what we are. They apparently don't care. Now, that's disappointing, that's depressing, whatever you want to call it, but that's just the way the world is. You have to accept it for what it is. You've got to know your limitations. Don't feel bad. Don't feel let down. Just understand that's what it is. See, going back, all of these books that I read, with the exception of the Blue Dawn series, they all deal with the idea of what you can influence, what you can change, and what we can do right here where we're at. The notion and the ideas in Small Farm Republic probably never going to get to a national level. But it's extremely workable at the state level in Texas. Extremely. But we have to have people willing to take it there and go do the job. Now, I happen to know, and a lot of my listeners happen to know, some state representatives. Maybe a state senator. I think this is something that they need to know about. I think this is something we should look into. I think this is a good idea. The idea of reinstituting federalism and using it for what it is to push back at federal encroachment, but secondarily to push back at state encroachment. Both the Book of Federalism shows some of the court cases where they've discussed this very problem, and 5-Star Plan 2024 comes in and talks about how you can approach it and deal with it and push back against it. And then throw in the whole notion that there's the majority of us in the United States that still self-identify as being Christians. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. We shouldn't hide it. We shouldn't pretend that we're a completely polytheistic society and nobody has any sway over other and everybody's equal. Well, that's not true. Nobody believes that. I mean, ask a Hindu or Sikh what it's like dealing with a Muslim. I mean, I'm not even getting into the Jewish folks. And to be clear, obviously, it's not all Muslims. Just like it's not all Christians that do things. It's not all Hindus that do things. But there's a reason why there are countries that have a predominant religion. You're supposed to recognize people that don't subscribe to that religion. You're supposed to not abuse them and mistreat them. Yes, absolutely. But you don't give them special rights. You don't give them special anything. They should be on an even playing ground. But we've inverted that. We are, in fact, into the negative world. And if you don't know what that is, there's plenty of people that talk on that. I'm sure I've brought up one of their books in the past, right? We went from a positive world to a neutral world to a negative world. Not my idea, not my explanation, but it's there, and I got to tell you, I agree with it. And if you doubt me, go look it up. So I've hit my 40 minutes. I've covered my books that I finished. I've given you a little aside on how that plays out in our state of Texas here. I want to just tack this on here for just a moment, if you'll bear with me. Now, you may have noticed I've got a new couple ads there. I happen to know one of the partners of that company. I think he's a great guy. I think it's a great product, a great idea. A little Texian pride. Wear the logoed shirt. They're expanding their products. You should check them out. I got a couple of the shirts. They look great. They really do. They fit well. I sent one to my father. Check it out. The ones I have are 100% cotton. Unfortunately, one of them got dried a little bit too much. My daughter will wear it. But they look great. They really do. They feel nice. They feel real, real nice. Go check it out. Texting Pride. The ad will follow this. And I encourage you. You want to support Texas? You want to support Texas products? There you go. Texting Pride. And with that, I will see you on the other side.
TexianPride.com is the destination for Texans who want to show off their love for Texas. We don't settle for mediocre. Our shirts are made from 100% high-quality athletic cotton. They're cool, comfortable, and designed to fit and flatter any body type. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit TexianPride.com for your next stylish Texas tee.